联合国环境规划署执行主任英格安德森接受高端访谈独家专访。他说：“中国生态文明建设成就超出预期。”
I've had the privilege of visiting this beautiful and massive country over a long period of time.
中国“15+5”规划关于绿色转型的部署，让他倍感喜悦。
That this is a very exciting new chapter that China is opening as well.
他还表示，习近平主席对多边气候行动的坚定支持，对世界意义重大。
Look, when we see a leader of a major nation such as China stepping up and say, look, these issues take global conversations, and the global conversations happen in multilateralism. That's obviously something that gives us a strength.
高端访谈，敬请收看。
关注国际焦点，洞察世界风云。大家好，欢迎来到本期的高端访谈，我是邹韵。本期节目，我们的对话嘉宾是联合国环境规划署执行主任英格安德森。当绿水青山就是金山银山理念与世界相遇，会激荡出怎样的回响？“14+5”时期，中国生态文明建设成就显著，它对于“15+5”规划又有怎样的展望？联合国气候变化大会11月开幕，面对气候行动中的分歧和挑战，国际社会应该如何凝聚共识，携手应对呢？今天我们一起在对话中寻找答案。This is Anderson. It's such a great pleasure to have you with us again on Leaders Talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me again. After 2 years, it's a pleasure to be back.
Let's start with some of the latest developments. You have referred the year of 2025 as a critical year for environment issues. So how so? And can we start the conversation by having you elaborate a little bit on the latest developments on climate agenda worldwide?
This is an important year because we also have to, we're heading to the COP for climate. And under the Paris Agreement, we agreed that every 5 years, we're going to submit what we call the NDCs, the National Determined Contributions. That's like our promises. What are we going to do now on climate? We submitted the first lots of promises, NDCs, in Paris in 2015, at COP21. The next ones in Glasgow in 2021. We missed a year because of COVID. And now it is time to do another set of promises in COP30. And there we have to really see a stretch, right? So this is important. On the nature side, we have decided, Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, we now have to see, because how are we doing on protecting nature? What is it that we have to get done? And on pollution, which is kind of the third element here, we have made some agreements amongst ourselves on how we are going to manage chemicals, how we are going to manage waste. And of course, we're negotiating a plastic treaty. All of this comes together this year where we have to look at how we're doing. And here I have to really give a good shout out to China because China is leaning in on each of these. And I look forward to discussing that in greater detail with you.
That would be great. And talking about the progress made by China on environmental issues, actually one of the latest announcement was made by President Xi back in September, which stated that China now aims to cut its economy-wide net greenhouse emission by 7 to 10% from peak level by 2035, while striving to do better. So how do you understand the meaning as well as the significance of China's new climate goals?
Now, this is very significant. It's really well regarded to see China making these enormous pushes forward on renewable energy. We are seeing new built gigawattage going online every year in terms of renewable solar and wind, around 200 to 300 gigawatts. It's mind-boggling in terms of the installed capacity.
Right.
Now, we still have a heavy coal load in China, so that's the reality. But with that striving towards reaching 60% of the capacity being renewable, that's massive. There is some real progress being made. And so, of course, in September at the General Assembly in New York, we saw live the video where the President, Xi Jinping, made the announcement of 7 to 10% reduction by 2035 and striving to do even better. And the reality is that China is already doing better. So probably it will be over-delivering on that promise, because we can see that the cadence by which, the speed with which renewable is being installed is very, very fast.
What was your feedback or response when you were there at assembling, listening to the speech delivered by President Xi, especially at a time when the global environmental issues are suffering so many setbacks, with some countries are rolling back on their commitment, while China is still leaning in, is trying to make more contribution? What was your response and what were you thinking at that time?
No, obviously I was very pleased. But I also am concerned because at the global level we are not heading where we need to be. We saw global emissions drop, but they're still increasing. But the increase used to be at 1.7%, now it's at 0.3%. But the reality that we are globally, I'm speaking globally, increasing our emissions is a concern, because that translates into, therefore, if we are to hit 1.5 degrees, we will need to reduce our emissions by something like 47% by 2030. And that's hard. And then the question is, how fast do we drive it down again? And this is where the striving to do better, stretching every day to do better. We want all countries to do that.
But Mrs. Anderson, this is a global issue that we're talking about, which required collaborative efforts and actions. China is making lots of efforts, that's for sure, but some countries that we saw are, as I said, rolling back their commitment, are scaling back on their responsibilities on environmental issues. So how concerned are you as the chief of UNEP about the disruption of this international cooperation? And what do you think should be done or urgently needed in order to accelerate joint efforts from the international community in order to achieve those goals?
So, of course, there are 193 member states of the United Nations, and there are 192 that are still very much pushing in favor of and in pursuit of the climate convention and the climate goals. That's the focus that we at the United Nations have to have. And we're very pleased to see that across the world in these 192 countries, there is an absolute commitment to make this happen. Of course, we respect that member states can make their own decisions. This is how it works in the world. And so one member state has made its decision, but the rest of the world is moving ahead. And the good thing is that we are seeing that ecological civilization, the green and clean development is in fact what is driving jobs, driving opportunity, driving growth, driving security. And so that is a dimension that many countries are very aware of. Now, we are seeing a number of countries making efforts, including, I've mentioned China, but I should also mention many European countries, many countries in Africa and Asia and Latin America, North America and Canada. And I think that's very important, not to lose hope and faith that the world is moving.
Mrs. Anderson, let's go back to the environmental progress here in China. The Two Mountains concept, which was proposed by President Xi when he was the party chief in Zhejiang province, has now become a guiding principle of the nation's ecological system. And last time during our interview, your words about loving the poetry of an expression of those waters and lush mountains are invaluable assets become the trendy topic among Chinese social media. So what do you believe are the most distinctive features of this concept in terms of advancing ecological civilization as well as green transformation?
I mean, when you can convey something that is really complex into poetic language, And so you have the two mountains, the mountain of green and the mountain of gold. And when you see and you convey that, and anybody can sort of imagine a lucid river being silver, because it sort of is. And when you see that that is in fact wealth, that environmental conservation and purity is a country's wealth and a gift by a country to itself and to the unborn child, to the next generation. When you can convey that, but then translate it into growth, into jobs, into opportunities, into a healthier living, it's something that people can understand. And I think we have moved, therefore, through this imagery, poetic imagery, into the real world of economic planning and real world of land use planning, but based on this way of conveying it to a people that has a history that is thousands of years and therefore can catch the beauty of that poetry. And I think, which is essentially an ecological message, which of course is why it resonates with me. We are now seeing that the two mountains theory and the two mountains framework is implemented across this country.
Exactly.
Precisely so that people in communities can see the benefits that they are gaining from a healthier agriculture, more productive agriculture, from cleaner streams, cleaner air, and of course from smarter, more sophisticated, can I say, industrial production that is cleaner, smarter, more mechanized, etc. It's a journey that all countries have gone through and are going through and still have to go through, depending on where we are in the development spectrum. But the Chinese method of sort of reaching into the future, painting a picture quite evocatively, that then describes for a people, this is where we're heading. It's quite powerful. And I think that that is what we are seeing in this country. And we are seeing cleaner air, and we are seeing more lucid water, and we are seeing more green mountains.
Yes.
And all of that is meaningful. And it is, as I said, a gift to the current generation, current population, but also to the generations to come.
With this concept, we are actually turning the vision into reality.
Precisely.
And actually this year also marks the 20th anniversary of this two mountains concept, the birth of this concept. So how do you understand the global significance of the two mountains concept in advancing the geological systems worldwide?
I think that another way of saying that maybe the world beyond China would relate to is the Sustainable Development Goals, in a sense, right? So many countries have sort of absorbed this learning and are really looking at what it would look like to tackle some of these polluting sectors, or indeed to think about conservation as a way to get wealth, as a way to get more vibrant agriculture, or as a way for ecotourism. So I think that at the global level, yes, also there is a solid understanding of this theory. They may use different language and different words and not necessarily the poetry of China and of President Xi Jinping, but nevertheless, I think that the concepts are well understood.
That's great. I would like to show you a short video, which is going to have something to do with your next stop. Let me see. This is a herd of elephant.
Oh, yeah.
Just some background information, because back in 2021, a herd of elephants, catching great attention, not only from the audiences here in China, but also worldwide.
I followed it.
You followed there are millions of yeah, me too. And people are calling them wandering elephants. So this is, I think, the elephants, they are taking a nap.
It's just wonderful.
Yeah, it's very cute. You see, yeah, they're this baby elephant. Yes.
And Mama is going, can you stop? Can you stop? Mama is saying, please, I'm taking a rest here.
Yes, just like a family.
Yeah,
so people are actually following you and me about where they're heading today.
Absolutely.
大象安然午休的景象，描绘着一段保护生物多样性的佳话。2021年，云南一群野生亚洲象北上又南返，旅程达1000余公里，吸引了全球目光。象群所到之处，沿途群众悄然避让，为大象们准备玉米、香蕉等食物，对大象保持了极大的爱护与宽容。中国政府与群众保护大象的行动赢得世界点赞。美国《华盛顿邮报》、日本朝日电视台、英国《卫报》、路透社等媒体纷纷追踪大象的足迹。外国网友说，这个事情发展了这么久，恰恰证明了人们的耐心。其他国家可能就直接把他们麻醉，移回丛林里了事。也有网友表示，我很高兴看到政府对待他们的方式充满尊重。我希望他们最终能找到一个安全且有充足的食物和水的地方安顿下来。70%的野生动物在过去的50年里灭绝了，我们必须尽全力拯救这些动物，每一只动物都是珍贵的。2021年10月，习近平主席在生物多样性公约第15次缔约方大会领导人峰会上表示，云南大象的北上及返回之旅，让我们看到了中国保护野生动物的成果。1年多以后，中国作为联合国生物多样性公约第15次缔约方大会的主席国，引领国际社会推动达成了昆明、蒙特利尔全球生物多样性框架，为全球生物多样性治理明确了路径。
People also see this as a very good example of China's improvements and advancement in biodiversity and in ecological systems. So what is your take on that? And also, what do you expect to experience in Yunnan, a place that is very famous for its natural beauty and biodiversity?
First of all, this wandering group of elephants, what a story, what a beautiful story. And we saw how people were protecting them. I mean, nobody was hassling this group. There was, and you know, they can be quite destructive when they move through agricultural lands, etc. Yes. But there was a lot of focus by the local people of ensuring that this group could do what they had to do and then eventually migrate their destination and not get into dangerous situations. And it was really an example of what we have to do as a global civilization, right? Take care of nature. Because when we take care of nature, nature takes care of us. It's as simple as that. And I'm really looking forward to it because it is Yunnan province. It's such a unique province. And I've never had the opportunity to visit before. And we're not just going for tourism. We will be having a meeting on the Kunming Fund. And it's a big step that China has taken to make this fund. It's well over 200 million over 10 years that China will make $1 million that China will make available for countries in the global south, that they can do biodiversity conservation in a manner similar to what China is doing and has done. This is a huge show of South-South solidarity and South-South collaboration.
The Kunming Biodiversity Fund that you just referred to actually was launched, as you mentioned, in May of 2024 last year, and you were in Beijing to witness this landmark initiative. And this is also the very first fund of its kind initiative by developing countries.
Precisely.
So what do you believe, Mrs. Anderson, is the greatest significance of this fund?
Well, biodiversity is under threat. And these monies that China has made available will be supporting key projects and key initiatives in the global south precisely to halt and reverse biodiversity loss. And it's not just to make nature in a museum, right, or in a protected area, but it's to make nature thrive in our cities, in our agricultural fields, in our back gardens. So that nature is not just something that we put a fence around and now it's beautiful to look at. No, nature lives in the city, everywhere. So the point is that this funding will help, together with much other funding, of course, to support projects, programs, initiatives, and policy directions in countries in the Global South precisely to support nature conservation, so that the goals of the biodiversity framework, that those 23 goals can be achieved by 2030.
从推动生态环境资源司法保护到共同探讨全球气候治理多边进程，安德森本次访华议程涵盖应对气候变化、生物多样性保护、塑料污染治理等多领域合作。广泛合作的背后，是中国“14·5”时期生态文明建设的坚实步履。这5年，绿色已成为神州大地的鲜明底色，森林覆盖率提高到25%以上，新增森林面积相当于一个陕西省的面积，贡献了全球新增绿化面积的1/4。长江、黄河全线达到2类水质标准。每3度电就有1度来自绿电。中国积极培育和壮大绿色生产力，通过南合作与120多个国家分享可持续发展经验。从青藏高原生态屏障到非洲光带援建项目，当长江呈现一江碧水向东流的壮美画卷，当蒙内铁路为野生动物保留迁移通道。世界见证着东方智慧对人与自然和谐共生的深刻诠释。
Mrs. Anderson, you've been to China many times and paying close attention to the efforts and the progress made by China on environmental protection. What impressed you the most in terms of China's advancement on environmental agenda, and what are the biggest contributions made by China on the international environmental dimensions?
So I was just telling my colleagues when we were driving here that my first visit to China was in 1990. And
over 30 years ago.
Over 30 years ago, so it was a very different China then. And I was sort of telling my younger Chinese colleagues what it was.
Were you born yet?
But at any rate, so just to say that, yes, I've had the privilege of visiting this beautiful and massive country over a long period of time. And so, of course, seen rapid development in the last 20 years or so, and accelerating in the last 10, I should say. But the contribution clearly is, I mean, what was in China, a country that was entirely reliant on coal, in distributed and highly polluting settings, have made massive movements on renewables. And some of the latest investments that we're seeing, the high solar in the mountainous area in the interior of the country. I was just reading, there's an article in today's newspaper in another country that speaks to the fact that it is equivalent, the latest installed capacity, just at the high solar, the elevated solar, because it's at a mountain height where the air is pure and so you and thin, so you get higher solar intensity. It corresponds to something like 6 Manhattans in terms of the size of these things. And so that is installed in no time. And of course wind, and as well as hydro. That's a massive achievement. But I will say on biodiversity, it's also big, very big. So I was really pleased to see in this international conference of CCICED the plans that are going into the 15th five-year plan that will start in 2026, because this plan speaks about zero waste, that this is a very exciting new chapter that China is opening as well.
As the world is now facing so many challenges, including on the climate and pollution front, and also the global governance is now coming to the crossroads. And Chinese President Xi has recently made a proposal of a new major initiative called the Global Governance Initiative, in which he emphasized the importance of different countries work in a concert way to tackle global challenges and to create a fair and equitable world. And in this initiative, climate change and also environmental protection, etc., a very important part of it. So, Mrs. Anderson, how do you understand the significance of this initiative proposed by President Xi in advancing multilateral climate action?
Look, when we see a leader of a major nation such as China stepping up and say, look, these issues take global conversations, and the global conversations happen in multilateralism. That's obviously something that gives us a strength, because these problems are of a global dimension and they need global solutions. And so discussing together, and yes, finding equity, yes, it's a difficult path forward, but working together to create that path. We can't leave anyone behind just because they're still on the development journey. We have to ensure, and there are no, a wealthier country doesn't have the right to pollute so that a poorer country ends up in climate trouble. So we have to think about this as one nation on this planet, one nation of humans, under the big flag of the United Nations, of course. We are but one people at the end of the day, interdependent and dependent on this planet and on the climate that it has. So looking at equitable and just transitions, looking at the commitments that we make, and making that a core pillar of a paradigm of thinking, and therefore a development paradigm, is very significant. As I said, when a leader steps forward and makes those clear declarations, it echoes, which I think from a United Nations perspective is very welcome.
Mrs. Anderson, thank you so much again for joining us here on Leaders Talk, and thank you for sharing your poetic views and insightful views on climate change as well as global environmental issues. Greatly appreciated.
It's been a great pleasure to be here, and I thank you so much for having this conversation.
Thank you.
在专访当中，安德森表示，从上世纪90年代起，他有幸在一段较长的时间里多次访问中国，见证这个美丽而辽阔的国家在生态文明建设方面的伟大成就，尤其是在近10年的加速变革。他还表示，在对有关生态环境的最新政策部署进行了解和研究后，他认为“十五五”规划将成为中国迈向未来的又一巨大飞跃。感谢您收看本期的高端访谈，我是邹韵，我们下期再会。